good, and it's 6 o'clock.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The time is 6 o'clock, and we're calling to order the Duncanville Special City Council meeting on July the 6th of 2023. Thank you for being with us this evening, and wanted to get immediately into what we have on our agenda so we can be expeditious with our information tonight. First thing that we have on the agenda is for the interim city manager, Mr. Brown, to discuss the agenda items, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, thank you for allowing me to discuss tonight's consent agenda. Item 4A, consider a resolution adopting the amendment of the Dallas County Hazard Mitigation Action Plan 2020 edition to include a safe room rebate program action item for the city. Mayor and Council, hazard mitigation planning is a proactive effort to identify actions that can be taken to reduce the dangers to life and property from natural hazard events. The City of Duncanville adopted the 2020 version of the Dallas Mitigation Action Plan, and this plan is updated every 5 years. Therefore, our emergency management staff can submit grant applications for specific items identified in the plan. And so Chief Rhodey is here to answer any questions that you may have regarding this particular item.
Any questions from council? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Next item.
Consent agenda item 4B, consider a resolution approving the amendment number 2 to the Memorandum of Understanding among participating local governments for criminal justice information sharing via the Dallas County prosecutor. This amendment will assist with sharing information with local governments for criminal justice information sharing purposes. If approved, the Duncanville Police Department can continue efficiently for filing state-level criminal cases with the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. And Assistant Chief Matt Stogner is here to answer any questions the council may have regarding this particular item.
Any questions, council? No. Thank you.
Consent agenda item 4C, consider a resolution approving an interlocal agreement between the City of Duncanville and the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office to obtain asset seizure fund created in compliance with Article 59.08 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure for services as contained in the agreement for property awarded. This agreement will allow the Duncanville Police Department to seek award for seized property under the Texas asset forfeiture laws. An interlocal agreement must be filed with the county of jurisdiction's prosecuting attorney to represent the department. And again, Assistant Chief Matt Stogner is here to answer any questions you may have.
I do have one question, Chief. In reading over the packet and understanding what we're now creating a relationship between ourselves and the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office. Is this the very first time we've done this, or is this something in the history we've had some relationship with them because of the, I guess it's a search and seizure of product and we're having to cross our borders and so forth?
Yes, sir, that's a very good question. Our seizure dates well before I got here. So I can't definitively say we've never had a relationship with them. I know a lot of our investigations do go outside our county, and this is nothing more than just a process, giving us the ability to seize whatever we need to seize based off Chapter 59 with the District Attorney's Office. That's who we go through for the seizure.
So was the initiative from our side saying we need to do this with Tarrant County, or did Tarrant County come to us and say this is something we need from the city?
Yes, sir, it is from Tarrant County.
So they came to us and we responded to them?
Well, okay, I understand your question now. No, sir, we had an investigation that moved into Tarrant County, and because of that, and because of some of the items that we dealt with out there for seizure, is the reason why we're doing this ILA.
Okay, so it was
Yes,
because of something we did. That was the impetus for creating this agreement.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you, appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Mr. Contreras.
Yeah, to that point, and maybe you answered this question in your answer there, but so this has to do with seizures that we made.
That the police department makes, that's correct.
The police department made in Tarrant County?
That's correct. Sometimes our investigations lead us to other locations, not obviously within Duncanville. don't want to get too deep into the weeds because it gets a little confidential. However, some of these investigations, as they progress, go outside our county.
Okay, so are there other counties that at some point in time we may have to do the same thing?
It is very likely,
Okay,
especially our neighboring counties.
sure, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir. Consent agenda item 4D. Consider a resolution confirming the interim city manager's appointment of Doug Sis as a member of the Duncanville Civil Service Commission for a 3-year term to expire October the 31st of 2026. For those of you who are new on the council, the commission oversees the entry-level and promotional testing, hiring, and employment procedures for police and fire classified employees. The commission responsibilities are established by the Texas Government Code, Chapter 143. And Mr. Sis has been a Duncanville resident for several years, and this will be his first term, if approved by the council, on serving the commission. He's been a civil service protected police officer for 35 years and can lead great value to this commission. And Mr. Siegel is here to answer any questions that you may have regarding this particular item.
Any questions from council? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Next item.
Consent agenda item 4E, consider a resolution approving the procurement of equipment, goods, and services to complete the technology requirements and implementation services for the new fire station, number 271, and an estimated expenditure amount of $1,079,404.65. And Ms. Spencer is here to answer any questions that the council may have regarding this particular item.
Any questions? I have a question. It's more on the money side than the IT side, to be honest. So maybe it's with Ms. Odie. I'm not sure. Mr. Brown. You know, looking at the itemization of this $1 million expenditure, about 98% of it is coming from ARPA funds. So my understanding, going back in time, is we had pretty well allocated the bucket of ARPA funds, but I guess not. If we've still got this somewhat almost close to $1 million coming out of ARPA funds, we still have some money left to expend.
Exactly, sir. We've only allocated, so we received 9.6 million in total allocation. We still have about 2.5 million of that.
Okay.
We had no plan for yet, and so we're directing all of that remaining funds toward the overages with the fire station, which includes the network.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
the mic.
I'm sorry, let me repeat that.
Okay, yeah.
So we had $9.6 million allocated at ARPA funding. We had not identified 2.5 million of that where it should go, so this is going towards the fire station and all the overages with that project.
Okay. Thank you. That answers my question. Yes, Councilmember Gooden.
Ms. Odie, so you said there were 2.5 million that have not been used.
Correct.
And this is asking for 1,055,000, so forth. So there will still be money left in the ARPA fund once this is taken care of? Is that what I understand? Or are you saying you're anticipating overages to?
Yes, ma'am. So the fire station in total is about, I don't have the number in front of me, over 3 million. That's in construction, including all of the ancillaries and IT, furniture, all of that stuff that goes in the building as well.
Mr. Contreras.
My question's for Gwen. Just very quickly, new fire station. Am I to assume that we're replacing most of the technology since it is a new fire station and we're not carrying anything over from the old fire station?
We can't carry anything over from the old fire station, so fire station 2 will stay intact. What we have identified as the EOC is actually their training room, so we can't gut that and bring it to fire station 1. So it will be a brand new EOC plus the technology that we have to put in the fire station. So even though it's redacted, if you need to see it, I can give it to you in executive session. But it gives you your cameras, your servers, your switches. We have a generator out there, so in the event of any type disaster, barring them blowing Duncanville off the map, we will be able to go to Fire Station 1 and resume operations.
Understandable, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions of council? No? That concludes our consent items. And moving on to item number 2 is the city council calendar, interim city secretary Downs.
Okay, so for July, we have the city council meeting, which will be held on July 18th. If you have not RSVP to our firefighters award banquet, can you please get with me or Miss Lacey Freeman by July 28th?
Can I interrupt?
Yes, sir.
In our last city council meeting, we discussed the upcoming agendas. We did cancel July 4th, special tonight. How does the agenda look for the 18th?
The 18th is a long city council meeting. We have a lot of public hearings for our Planning and Zoning Commission.
Was there 4? I remember reading the minutes from the P&Z. Were there 4 or 5 public hearings the P&Z held at that time?
I think it's 5,
5.
but it is 5 meetings.
Okay.
Or public hearings, sorry.
Okay, so in addition to the public hearings, regular business that we have to take care of.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I will try to put as much as I can on consent, I promise you.
And we will try as much as we can to consent.
Okay, so in August, we have the city council meeting on August 1st. Board and commission interviews will take place on August 7th and 8th. On Thursday, August 10th is gonna be the city manager budget workshop. The firefighters banquet will be on the 12th, which is a Saturday. The 15th, we have the city council meeting. City council retreat is on the 21st of August. And then the 24th, which is a Thursday, is going to be a public hearing and tax rate on the budget. We have a special called meeting on August 29th, which is a Tuesday, and that's gonna be a special meeting, and plus we're going to adopt the fiscal 24 budget.
Going back to the retreat, we did decide that's going to be right here, or,
It will be local, is that?
but did we say it was going to be right here in this building, or did we? We
No,
have not
it won't
defined the
be in this
location.
building, it'll be on a city property, but
city-
not in this building, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And then for September, we have a city council meeting on the 5th. And then the police award ceremony will be on Friday at 4 p.m. At the senior center, so come see me because I'll be there. On the 19th, we have a city council meeting, and that is it.
And just a side note, for September the 9th, last year we had a drought, so they weren't able to stock it and have the catfish fish with the police department. We had to delay that until we actually had a rain. So
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
pray for rain so that this actually happens.
Yes,
Don't have to push it off on the calendar again.
that's right.
Thanks, okay. Any questions, council? No? All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 3, briefings and presentations. Item 3A, council to receive an update from T2 Professional Consulting regarding the executive search process. City Manager Brown? We're not there yet. All right, so interim City Manager Brown, the floor is yours on 3A.
Thank you, sir. Mayor and council, we have with us this evening Mr. Michael Wilson. He is the CEO of T2 Professional Consulting. Mr. Wilson is going to just get some clarification from council regarding the city manager process and also provide some update information.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, Mayor, members of council. I'll be succinct. Just wanted to provide a quick briefing on where we are in the project, but also remind you on some direction that we still await from you so that we can stay on target and get all those logistics worked out. So to date, obviously we've kicked off. We've ran our campaign of internal surveys with staff. We're now working with city staff, Mr. Brown and his team on on-site times and dates. What we still need from council is the identification of a benchmark committee. If you recall, the benchmark committee will work with us in identifying the key accountabilities for your next city manager that will then guide the process. That committee can be represented by members of council, if you so choose, or it can be any combination of constructs. So we've had cities elect to utilize council members, but also community members and maybe department heads in creating that. Obviously, if it's going to be represented by council, we need to take that into account so that we can identify meetings and get posted agendas and those things. The benchmark committee will meet twice. The first session takes about 2 hours. The follow-up session is about an hour-long session. And ideally, we would like to hold the first meeting on one day, then 2 days later, have that follow-up so that we can solidify the benchmark, make any changes to job descriptions to bring that to council for consideration so that we can get your position advertised.
So, Mr. Wilson, for a city our size, looking at that benchmark committee, do you have any guidance for us in terms of the number of people on a committee that can actually make things happen? You get it too large, then you get kind of strangled, but
Yeah, so
what's the right size for us?
we really don't want to have more than 7.
Okay, there's the answer, okay.
Any other questions concerning the benchmark?
Okay.
Okay, great. So I'll answer any questions that you all may have about where we're at in the process or timelines. Our hope is to be able to complete the benchmark and that process over the next 2 weeks so that we can begin advertising at about the 3 to 4 week mark. We're working internally, gathering all of the information necessary around your great city, and also getting our communication staff together with your communication staff so that we can identify key areas that we definitely want to highlight about the city of Duncanville, the surrounding area, so that we can really identify the best candidates to submit to you.
So in that interim between the completion of the benchmark committee work and then the advertising, I know based on our experience last time we went through this process, the preparation of the brochure, the advertising brochure, took quite a bit of time. You said you're already gathering that information, so
Yes.
it's already in preparation in terms of
It
editing
is.
and putting compilation for the guest.
Right, so kind of the final steps is working with your communications team, to make sure that we have proper logos, proper, coloring, proper, if there's any certain taglines, things that you really want to highlight or initiatives in the city that are beyond just what's common knowledge right now. Areas that you all are passionate about and really pressing within your community. We want to make sure that we truly highlight that. So what she's been working on for the last week is just gathering not just local information, but also regional information, being in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that's very unique in the state of Texas. So we really want to highlight all of those things and all of the fun things, the lakes, the entertainment, the arts, etc.
It's always to our benefit if we can see that ahead of time.
Yes, sir.
Rather than
So-
say, here it is, you got 2 hours to finish this, so however you work that with the city manager to give us that as a preview by email so we can take a look at it would be
Yes,
helpful.
sir. So that's exactly what we will do. We'll want you to review the pamphlet and, kind of put your stamp of approval, that you believe that it encompasses everything that you want to promote for your city. The same with the job description. If there's any modification within that, obviously that's going to need to come to you all. Looking at some of the other areas that we look at, pay ranges, salaries, et cetera, that's also ongoing right now.
Okay.
So that we can make sure that we're tracking.
My apologies, Mr. Contreras, I was so intent of listening and watching his eyes, I didn't see. So, Mr. Veracruz, yes, sir, please.
Thank you, Mayor. If we're going to use some of the council, I'd like to volunteer.
That's one. Okay. Mr. Contreras, yes, sir.
Well, Joe got a little ahead of me there. I was gonna ask, how soon would you like to see this benchmark committee recommendation back from us?
As soon as possible.
Okay.
If it was a perfect world, I would try to hold the benchmark sessions next week, just because we're trying to be aggressive with the time period. So as soon as you all can decide what direction you want to go, the sooner the better.
Okay, with that, Mayor, that I would like to, as a council, get together. We can even do it electronically after this meeting to get a consensus of how we want to, what we want the structure of this committee to be, and then we could get volunteers from the council that would like to partake in that.
Well, you know, as Mr. Wilson said too, looking at some of our staff directors and how we would accommodate some of that. To be honest, making it 7 is I'd like to see a few more, but I understand 7 is how you can get things operating, get things done.
Correct.
So we need to sit down. How, Mr. Attorney, is that necessary to be an executive session, or can we just, is that a piece of what we can discuss in executive session this evening?
You can discuss it here, because you're not talking about, executive session would
Right.
be if you were talking about an individual,
Okay.
but process you can talk about here.
So actually, Mr. Contreras, you know, it's a good point as mayor. Right now, if we want to have open discussion in terms of X number of people from council, X number of people from staff, do you ever bring in people from the community?
We do. So the recommendation would be maybe a resident and a business owner, so you can get two
There you go.
different perspectives.
Okay, so resident, business owner, that's 2. 2 from council, that's 4. Or maybe 3 from council would be 5. And Mr. Brown, if you wanted to get together with your staff and maybe pick 3 from staff, how does that sound to council? So that would be, let me reiterate the composition. We would have, I'm gonna make notes here. We have 3 from council, 1 business owner, 1 resident, and what does that make? That's 5. That leaves 2 individuals from staff for a benchmark committee of 7. Is that agreeable to everybody here?
Do we have 2 that's willing?
Well, he kind of needs to have a discussion with, okay, so I'm gonna put staff right here. So Mr. Brown, that's what we've got. That'll be the composition of the benchmark committee. 3 from council, 1 business owner, 1 resident, and 2 from staff. And I think if it's okay with council, I know each of us probably know some business owners and some individuals that might be good for this. So not to put any onus of suspense dates or anything on council, but if you want to think about that and provide some information on names to Mr. Brown for business owners or residents, and then they can work that and get back to us, and we can actually discharge that by email, I think. Isn't that right, Mr. City Attorney?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So we can discharge the composition, or what do I say? We can complete the composition of the benchmark committee by email, send in your recommendations on individuals and business owners to Mr. Brown, and then he'll get back to us, and then we can select those other 2 individuals. Well, yeah, that's said. I hate to put a suspense on it, but yeah, I think if to do what we're doing in terms of what T2 needs to do their job well, it needs to be by close of business tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Great.
I know that's a heavy push, because some of us have to make some phone calls to people to say, would you? You know, I'd like to nominate you. Would you? Could you? So let's make that, if we can, Mr. Brown, suspense to ourselves. Close the business tomorrow to provide residents' names and business owners' names. So then we'll come back again, and we can complete that by email as well. Okay.
Yeah, Mayor, I admonish council to be careful about communicating with each other about
Right,
that,
right,
so that
right.
we avoid open meetings
Right.
violations.
Singular emails from ourselves to Mr. Brown. and Mr. Keys and Ms. Lewis. I guess that's your preferred communication line, right?
Yes, sir.
So Mr. Brown, Mr. Keys, and Ms. Lewis on all of our individual emails to Mr. Brown on those names. Okay.
Great. There's one other point that I would like to seek clarification from council on, and that's communication. We pride ourselves in exhaustively communicating during the process. How would council like us to communicate progress as we go through this process? Obviously, we will get to a particular point to where we will share candidate information. Obviously, that will be in a different format. The updates that I'm talking about is updating you on where things are being advertised, where, what are the numbers looking like that we're receiving? How many people have moved from basic, just applying, to phase one of the vetting process, et cetera, et cetera. So what would be the best route where we can directly communicate, maybe make it easier on staff if we can eliminate some tasks? We're very willing to, we can do that in a video format, a video update. We can do that in providing, a memo to be distributed to council. So if you all could provide us with that direction so we meet your expectations.
I think we had some discussion about this earlier, that Mr. Brown would be a singular point of contact and then distribution from him to us.
Okay.
Is that my recollection? Do y'all remember some discussion about that?
Okay. Would y'all prefer a video format just so you can listen to it, or would you prefer to read?
I'm a reader. I don't know. What do y'all want to do?
Okay, great.
Yeah. Can you do both?
We could, yes.
If you have a dictating word processor, you can video it and it would take it down as you say it.
Yeah, so we have someone much more talented than me that will have to kind of walk me through that process, but she does a great job. But we'll provide both formats.
Okay, thank you. What other things you need from us, Mr. Wilson?
Last question is, when we do start to bring in candidates, at which phase of the process would council like to see the candidates who have made application? Understand the first step of the process is making sure they're meeting the minimum qualification. If they meet those minimum qualifications, they go into phase one vetting. And within that phase one vetting, there's some exercises and some tasks that they have to complete. So would council like to see all candidates that are applying, or would you like to start to see candidates as they complete the phase one vetting process and forward?
I would say after phase one.
There you, gotta hear you. No, turn it on. There you go.
I would say after phase one. I don't see the point in us seeing people that may not make it to the next round.
Okay, great.
I agree with Ms. Gooding.
Okay, now, so phase one is prior to the semifinalists, correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, just so we put that in sequence, we're looking at, we don't know how many is gonna be in that number. It could be significant or it could be
Correct.
very small. Okay, so we agree on, let's hear from you with the phase one list.
Yes, sir. So we'll provide you a list of those that complete the phase one, because some will see the phase one and go, I'm not gonna do that. Or they just won't have time, maybe in their schedule or other things are going on. So after phase one, those that complete, just for my understanding, then we'll start providing those updates of those individuals. Now, how we work is everything runs concurrent. We're not going to run it for 30 days and then do phase one vetting. So as those resumes start to come in, then they go in, then we're doing our review from day one. That's how we're able to speed up the process and operate the most efficiently.
So it's gonna be a congregate at the end of phase one?
Yes, sir.
Very good, okay.
Yes, sir. So we'll give
Thank
you
you for-
bite-sized pieces,
Okay,
so you're not inundated all at one time.
very good. Thank you for that clarification. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
Hey, Mayor, I'd be interested in serving on that committee as well.
Okay. Mr. Contreras, you mentioned it. Did you want to be on that benchmark committee?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Veracruz, Mr. McBurnett, and Mr. Contreras have made a preference. That does not preclude other members of council from wanting to be on the benchmark. If you wanted to throw your hat in the ring, and we can discuss that. Anybody other than Mr. McBurnett, Mr. Contreras, and Mr. Veracruz who wish to be on the benchmark committee? Okay. Ms. Cherry Brown would like to be on the committee as well. So now we are at 4 council members. Would any of the other, sorry? That would, yeah, then that, or one of the other 3, could cede their position to you. And none of those individuals want to do that. So you're withdrawing? Okay, so it will be Mr. Veracruz, Mr. McBurnett, Mr. Contreras. Settles that question. Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As soon as we form out the rest of the committee, then we'll press to work through the logistics so that we can set those meetings.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Going on to item number 3B, presentation and discussion of the FY 23-24 pre-budget workshop and the follow-up items. And Chief Innovation Officer Jennifer Odie. Floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I just want to take this opportunity to get in front of you guys again to follow up on some items that you had requested that we brought up in the pre-budget workshop. So it's just providing you some information to continue to consider as we continue through this budget development process. The first thing I wanted to bring up to you, because it has been an issue, or has come up, I should say, as a concern from council regarding the legislative session that's going on right now. So there is obviously a lot of chatter in legislation about property tax and reducing property tax burdens on your citizens. So I just kind of wanted to recap the biggest pieces of legislation. So session number 1 ended, as you may recall, and Governor Abbott has called a second session until they can come together with property tax agreement, or what they want to do with property tax. So in session 1, they introduced a Senate Bill 26. Basically, what in this bill, it reduces the school district revenue that they get from property taxes. It's increasing the mandatory homestead exemption from $40,000 to $100,000, as well as a piece in there about franchise tax, where it should give some small businesses some relief with the franchise tax they have to pay to the state. In session number 2, the same bill was introduced, Senate Bill 1. Same bill is currently sitting in the House. Why I bring this up to you now is that there's been some, I guess, concerns about how this might impact the city. As far as I have been able to research, look through TML and other legislative sites, that all of this only impacts school districts at this time. There is no implication to cities at this time. So I just wanted to give y'all some relief on that, at least this fiscal year, that we should not have any impact to the city. So the second thing I wanted to bring up is the calculation of the tax rate. This is very preliminary, but I wanted to give you an idea of what we may be looking at once we get the certified tax roll, which will not come to us until July 25th. So at that time, we'll be able to calculate more accurately what the proposed tax rate will be. So what I did here, I have 2 scenarios. One, and I'll get to the debt piece here in a minute, but the first scenario here is without debt, okay? So calculating the O&M, the operation and maintenance, calculating the debt piece, which is to meet our debt obligation. You'll see the total voter approval rate of 0.61. So that's about 0.03 less than the current tax rate, which equals about $34 less on a $100,000 home compared to 22. If we proceed with a tax note, so as you may recall, we talked about last year you did a reimbursing resolution with the intent to issue debt, and I'll go to that here in the next slide. If we are to proceed forward with that, to issue a tax note to cover the overages for the bond projects, as we have talked about 4.7 million was the maximum that you agreed per that resolution. This would be something that would be added to the debt rate. So the tax note is sensitive to when you pass the tax rate and you adopt the tax rate, you have to sell the tax note and where the debt is issued to us prior to adopting the tax rate. So if you want it to be included in your tax rate. So if we proceed forward with doing a tax note, that would increase our interest and sinking rate about 0.03. So as you can see what that would do to the voter approval rate and what that would do to the difference and the impact. So.
Any questions at this point? So just rewind just a second, or
Sure.
the clarification on the difference from the 2022 rate of
Mhm.
0.650460. Even with the rate with tax note debt, we're still below the total. The total voter approval rate is still below the difference, so we will not have to go to our community.
Correct. So the total voter approval rate, we would not recommend a rate that is higher than that column that says the total
Exactly.
voter approval rate. The difference is just the difference from the current tax rate we have set now.
Okay.
How much that rate is reduced, and then the impact on a $100,000 home as a
Okay.
benchmark.
Mr. Brown, reading the packet over and then looking at this and listening to what Jennifer has to say, there may be a need for staff to consider some type of educational piece of information submitted out to our constituents to understand what's just been said here. Because
Absolutely.
looking at it very clearly, all of a sudden somebody say, well, the city's taking on more debt. And it's really not the case.
And I have more slides here. I just
Okay.
wanted to preface so you can see the two different rates and how that might impact the total rate. So I'll move on to the next slide. So as you may
Well,
recall, I'm sorry.
Just want to make sure.
Sure, sure.
it's- Okay.
Yes.
Because, as I said, at first blush, I was reading this and I'm going like, whoa. I don't think we're taking on more debt, but I think we're taking on more debt based on the way that this is being articulated here. So
Correct.
as something for y'all to consider and for community intake
Absolutely.
and understanding. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
It's okay. So there are two different kinds of debt to consider, and the reason why I bring up debt is because, again, we talked about reimbursing ourselves for the expenditures that we're paying for the overages of the bond projects. You did a resolution back in July of last year. The maximum amount was $4.7 million that we would consider an intent on issuing future debt. Okay, so there's two different kinds of debt that perhaps we can consider. There's a tax note, which I just mentioned. A tax note, you don't have to do any formal intention with council. There's no publication that has to be done, like a mandatory publication. Typically, it's a 7-year maximum repayment. And then I projected the rate there. So if we were assuming 4.7 million in a debt issuance, that increases the debt rate. But the sale must occur prior to us adopting the tax rate. So if we proceed forward with doing a tax note, we would have to have that sale occurring before we adopt the tax rate at the end of August. So that can be factored into the tax rate. So it has to occur before we adopt it in order to have it be factored into the tax rate itself. There's also a certificate of obligation, which is the second kind of debt. There is a notice of intent required on your part. We're mandatory. We have to have a 45-day publication period to the public. This is where you list a brief, these are the different projects. This is for public safety. This is for streets. This is for, whatever the project may be. So that is publicized and it's transparent. Certificate of obligation could be 10 to 40 year, repayment windows, typically 20. And then this certificate of obligation would allow for a greater capacity of issuance. So if you have other needs, for example, this may be a better route to go. And I'll get to another slide that kind of, I think hopefully will hit it home to you. The only thing about a certificate of obligation is that we would not be able to do it this year because of the timeline, the window that we have to advertise it. It has to all be done before adopting the tax rate. So we might have missed this window going to doing the certificate of obligation. Forgive me.
So, question, unless you're going
Yes.
to cover it. So,
Yeah.
looking at the CO and looking at this bullet in terms of greater capacity of issuance, is that inferring then that as the debt, if we were to issue it, it's used as necessary, but it's not encumbered until it's used or requested?
I believe so, yes.
So it's like a line of credit.
Mhm.
So that line of credit hangs out there in limbo until we actually need to use that line of credit. We don't encumber that debt itself until we actually require it for some use, as it says here, regular capacity for issuance. I take that at some later date when we see when it's necessary. Am I reading this correctly?
Well, what this is trying to say is that going back to the conversation of that 4.7 million that we talked about, that you did a resolution on to reimburse ourselves for the overages of all of the bond projects. We could not do a certificate of obligation for this tax year because we've kind of are outside of that window. We have an early adoption date of the end of August. So there has to be an intent on your part. There's some legality there that you have to do. And then we have to publicize it for 45 days before it can be issued and before we adopt the tax rate. So the timeline doesn't work for us to include it in this tax year, is what I'm trying to say. And so I ran had Mr. Hughes, our financial advisor, run a couple of scenarios so you can kind of see what the repayment schedule would look like for a tax note. Like I said, it's 7 years. You can see what that tax rate looks like there on the far right column, and you can see, again, how much property and interest payment that we have to have in order to, pay our debt back. And so that's where that tax rate comes from. It's assuming, obviously, our evaluations are probably going to increase over time, but this obviously doesn't assume that. Again, it's the scenario of the tax rate note. If we were to defer issuing debt until next year and maybe allow, having a bigger conversation of some other needs that we have other than just the overages in the bond, perhaps a certificate of obligation might be a better way to go. As you can see, it's for a longer period of time, but the burden on the debt piece of it is really the same. If you do a tax note, you have a 7-year. It's a smaller amount that's issued versus, a certificate of obligation, which is a bigger amount that we can possibly issue for the same cost, essentially, in the rate.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was thinking one thing and then you went a different direction. So
Sorry.
looking at the total P&I, we've got 26.8 for the outstanding debt if issued now. We got 40.6 for a CO. To me, that P&I debt load, that debt service obligation is $14 million difference.
Mm-hmm.
And you just said they're the same.
Well, I mean, in terms of what the burden to the taxpayers would be for
Burden to
paying.
the taxpayer.
paying
Oh,
it back.
okay. Okay, because I was
Yes.
taking the burden to the city in terms of taking on that debt.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason I bring this up, because, we really haven't had a good, I think, in-depth conversation, at least not in.
Mr.
I'm sorry.
Well, go ahead and finish what you're saying.
Okay, I know it's a lot to throw at you to absorb at the moment, but I don't think we've really had a good conversation with council, at least not in recent years that I can think about when it comes to talking about the needs of the city, infrastructure needs, facility needs, all that kind of thing. We haven't really engaged and talked about a long-term planning or maybe a debt strategy. I went back and looked at our financial policies and what it says about, what is the maximum amount of debt that, we would consider, what's that burden look like. Perhaps this could be a topic for a retreat. But here you'll see here's some needs that we have coming down the pipeline in the very near future, and there's more. But just to kind of give you an idea of, we could go ahead and issue the tax note, and that covers us for the overages of the bonds. But then we have all these other, needs as well. Do we want to possibly consider a strategy that allows us to do that as well as maybe cover some other needs in the same debt issuance? So that's the intention of bringing it up. So like we have some things with regional dispatch that we're going to have to pay next year. They're going to be upgrading their building, and so we're going to have to pay a cost share to that. It's going to be $1 million on our part. They're going to construct a whole new facility in 3 years, so that's $4.3 million that we're going to have to pay on our part. They have hardware and software that they're changing, which is they're projecting it over the course of 10 years, but that obviously will be an impact to us. We also have our own projects. We have traffic operation, safety, outdated systems and outdated communication that needs to be updated. We can make it work, but at the same time, it's not as reliable. So there's just a list of needs. So I bring it up not for you to have an answer today, but more of a, it needs to be a conversation that we have with you guys for long-term planning and a debt strategy. So.
Okay, thank you. Can you go back to 5? One more, 4, I guess. Okay, so when we talked about the CO, that last bullet point, you said that essentially it's too late for 2023.
Unless we were to push back our adoption, but I don't think y'all want to do that. So.
Okay, so in the next slide, I believe, you went back and talked again about the CO. But were you talking about it only in that we put this off until 2024? And in that case, we would have the proper timeline for a CO?
Yes.
Okay, and then that's where you're also tying in that we could include other debt that we have that we would want to get covered at the same time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because I know you don't want to stack debt and then add more debt and add more debt, so again, it's just about strategizing on debt management. Do you have any other questions on this before I move on? No? Okay. The next thing I wanted to bring back up was TMRS. You wanted to see the scenarios. I'll definitely provide a copy for you all to see all of this information. But just so you can kind of see what the budget impact would be if we entertained any of the options that you see there. So if we only did 100% updated service credits, and that only affects current employees, that price tag would be about $300,000 total. If we did a 100% updated service credit and 30% COLA, you could see that burden would be $630,000 in additional costs to the city. And if we were to implement what we did when we back in 2008, that would be that far right column, what we had before, with repeating updated service credits and repeating COLAs, that'd be $2.5 million. So just so you can get an idea of what that cost would be for those different benefit packages. And then lastly, just wanted to bring back enterprise, that conversation. We will be bringing it back to you on the 18th meeting and consent to move forward with the lease program. So I wanted to give you kind of a comparison, what we're doing today versus what that program would look like. So currently we have about 145 vehicles, equipment in rotation currently, and how we do the contributions and payment for that. So each department that has a vehicle, police, building inspections, utilities, you name it, contributions are charged to those departments, okay? And there's a formula that we use that does a future value. So, when we buy it 10 years down the road, this is the probable, cost at that time. And so they make contributions into a fleet rotation fund. And so when it comes time to replace it, or we will pay cash for those vehicles. But the current challenges that we have in our current way of doing it is really, I think we're just, so orders have been canceled in recent years. Manufacturers start making the models that we wanted. They're taking a lot longer to fulfill, so it's a delay in us getting the vehicles, and then it takes us even longer to market and equip it and that sort of thing. We're maintaining older vehicles, which means when we have to replace parts and have repairs, parts are on back order. Other people are fighting over the same parts, so there's delay in repairs. And then we just don't have the buying power that a big corporation, you know, honestly would. So those are some of the challenges that we have on this cash basis that we currently have. So what you see here is a lot of numbers, but it'll give you an idea of our current cash-only plan. So I planned it out as if we didn't move with enterprise. So this is what it looks like for the next 5 years. You can see the contributions going into the fund, how much cash we pay for the vehicles, and at the bottom, that's how many vehicles that we're replacing every year. And then the second one is really a hybrid plan. So even more numbers here, but the same contributions going in to the fund. It also has the cash purchases for the vehicles that are not a part of the enterprise system. So that would be the fire trucks, the ambulances, the heavy duty equipment, things like that. So we still have the cash to pay for those vehicles. It shows the lease payments that we're paying to enterprise. It shows the additional costs that we are paying to mark, install, you know, equip the vehicles, as well as the estimated equity that gets returned to us that ideally we would roll into the payments, but this would be for them selling our cars and we get the funds for it, or when the lease is up and they sell it at the right time where we get the best value back. All of that's factored in. And then at the bottom you'll see here's the count for the cash replacement items and then the count for the lease items. So all in all, when you see this, it's really not a financial impact for us to proceed with an enterprise plan. It's not going to affect us financially. It may save us down the road with gas and repair costs. That's kind of hard to calculate at this point. But the main benefit is that we have the services of enterprise. They're the ones going out and getting the vehicles. They have the backing to be able to deal with the manufacturers and then going through them with the repairs and the relationships with the vendors and all of that stuff. Having enterprise to kind of do all of that on our behalf will certainly help us. So that is it.
Oh, question.
Sure.
Oh, Mr. Contreras, you first.
Okay, I have a question, and,
By the way, Ms. Gooden, your job is to help me look. Okay. Remember I said that first city council meeting? Okay.
Like I said, it's a lot of numbers,
Yeah.
but
Here, go. All right, Mr. Contreras.
okay, the first one is a question, so this is 2 parts. You surveyed other cities in the Metroplex. Do you have any idea how many are using the enterprise system?
quite a few. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but in their presentation, they had listed quite a few. I know I recently actually talked to the city of Keller, and they're very happy with them, and I think the city of, and Mr. Brown had talked to a few as well, and they have been pretty pleased with the program.
So this is all encompassing of all the vehicles. That includes not just the city vehicles such as service center vehicles, building inspections, code enforcement, but also police and fire?
Yes,
Okay.
and it's putting them in the rotation, assuming the rotation, the 3-year life cycle on those, being able to replace those quicker.
Okay. And the question is, if you got involved with this program and we decided it wasn't working out, then you're in a situation after we've sold off all our vehicles to get into this program, we have to purchase all new vehicles. If we reached a point 2 years, 3 years down the road where we didn't think this program was working for us.
Mhm.
So,
I'm glad you asked that question, because I asked that question.
okay, well then I'd like to hear the answer, I think.
Yeah, so, you know, the strategy is we're not going to replace all of our vehicles all in one sitting. We're going to, have it phased in, number one. And a couple years down the road, we decide we're not happy. Yes, we have a couple options. Number one, we can just buy those vehicles outright, which would be, pretty big chunk of cash, I'm sure, to pay the value of those vehicles minus what you've already paid leasing-wise. Or you can let the lease phase out, so when the next one comes up, you just buy cash on your own and you're phasing it out. Kind of thing would be pretty much the way.
Okay, well, just one comment to that, and thank you for that information, though, is that I think it would be prudent for us to actually see a scenario where if that happened 2 years down the road, what that one-time cost to buy back our vehicles would be.
Cash out.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And they do, we'll have to admit, it wasn't presented to you, but they do have a cash purchase option as well. In the city of Keller does the cash option, so they pay for the vehicle outright versus, doing a leasing program. But with the number of vehicles that we have, I mean, again, that's a lot of cash to pay, initially to try to get our vehicle fleet replaced. So it might not be financially prudent to do the cash option, at least not as aggressively as we're trying to here.
Would it be putting Mr. Lowe on the spot to ask Asa?
Well, you took the words out of my mouth, and you got to get to Mr. Vera Cruz, but at some point, I was going to say,
All right, thank
Mr.
you.
Lowe probably needs to weigh in to help us understand the situation at some point. Ms. Vera Cruz.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I was just gonna say, I think this enterprise plan is an excellent plan. I know when I was working for the city of Dallas, something similar with the parts and whatnot for the vehicles we currently have, most of my budget went towards just getting replacement parts when I could get them. And it caused a lot of safety issues. So I think we ought to go with this plan. And then secondly, can you go back to that employee service credits slide for me? Yes, so the far right, 100%, 70% COLA repeating. So what is the number? It's not 2.5 every year to repeat, is it?
That is 2.5 million in addition to our current budget. So we would have to maintain that level, and then payroll grows. So when payroll grows, of course, the cost grows too with it, but we would have to maintain that level of expense.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Brown, would it be acceptable to ask Mr. Lowe to come forward and give us his opinion on the enterprise?
Yes, sir.
Because looking at that spreadsheet that's been put together, it's very impressive. It's a lot of numbers, and it's like the bottom line, looking at that last line number of vehicles. One piece of clarification, it was mentioned police and fire. I think it needs to be clarified that it excludes the apparatus, like the fire engines.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Right, yeah. So we're looking at regular vehicles, not firefighting apparatus.
For the lease program
Yeah,
part,
okay,
yes.
Yeah. Mr. Lowe, yes, sir.
Yeah, that also excludes like our heavy-duty, the dump trucks as well. So no fire trucks, ambulances, your no concrete trucks or the dump trucks, more of your lighter-duty vehicles. And I do think this would be a very good program. They have teams of people that analyze and figure out when to trade in the vehicle. Currently, I might have a 10-year-old pickup truck with only 50,000 miles on it. Personally, it's hard for me to get rid of a truck with that few miles, when it can still be used. But from our perspective, we weren't looking at the money on the back end. In the presentation, I don't believe you were available that night, Mr. Contreras, but it showed a 2-year-old pickup truck with, I believe it was 14,000 miles, and the turn-in value was within $500 of what it was actually paid for, because we still do get the government pricing, whether it be HGAC, buy board, or state of Texas pricing, Sourcewell. So that we're buying at a cheaper price, and then when it turns around and they are auctioning it off or selling it off, they're getting retail value for it. With such a shorter life cycle, that will save a lot in repairs as well. The vehicle's not getting as old. It doesn't have to go to the shop as much for repairs. And it's going to alleviate pressure on my guys. We have two mechanics and their supervisor that take care of all the fleet. We do outsource quite a bit because we don't have the capability. But in addition to the vehicles and equipment on this rotation sheet, we also have smaller equipment and trailers that the guys are needing repairs on as well. So usually those take a back burner to these more high-dollar vehicles.
So would it be safe to say that you don't see any end in sight to the amount of time, how difficult it is to get parts and how long it takes to get them? And in addition to that, how long it takes to get a vehicle?
Well, I thought it would have been leveled out by now and, back to normal. So I have no idea anymore.
But it hasn't.
I know. A couple of years ago, I would have told you that today that we'd be back to normal, be able to purchase like normal and have parts available like normal, but now I couldn't tell you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you have to rewind to the slide or not, but looking forward to some of the future considerations for as long as I've been around, we have been talking about the automatic water metering system.
Yes.
And I didn't see that included. That doesn't mean it's not included. I mean, somewhere in the back of our minds that is still tallying up and we're still looking at doing that, Mr. Brown.
That's correct, Mayor. This list is not all inclusive.
Yeah.
That information that I have regarding the AMIs, we're putting that together for a presentation to the council.
Okay.
And
And
so
let me-
that is coming very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Apologize, didn't mean to interrupt. Let me also add, though, the needs that I'm talking about and the debt scenarios I'm talking about are tax-supported debt. So AMI, for example, could be under water, sewer debt, which
Got it.
would be supported by the revenue.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I know that all of this information is a precursor to our workshop,
Yes, sir.
right? This is like dropping the dime, and pretty soon we've got to pick up a quarter to understand all this. Yeah, we appreciate it. All right. This is extremely good information, very impressive to be put together in this amount of detail, Mr. Brown and staff. We do appreciate it. Thank you. Moving on to item 3C, discussion on the city council retreat. This is yours, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir. Mayor and council, you directed me to look into retreat for the council. We've done that. We've contacted our facilitator. He is available on August the 21st. So I just need to get some information from council regarding how you would like the retreats scheduled. I think two of you have provided some detailed information. I think Councilmember Coots provided some information, and Mayor, you provided some information. But essentially what staff needs is, how many retreats would you like to have for the remainder of calendar year 2023? Mayor, I think you indicated that you would like to have 2 retreats for the remainder of 2023, and Councilmember Kuntz, I think you indicated that August the 21st works for you, and the second one for later fall. But that's the first thing we would like to know is, how many would you like for the remainder of 2023? And the location of the retreat, I think you indicated that you definitely want it to occur within the city. And then the length, you want it all day, you want it half day, and if we could get that information from council, we will get this scheduled.
So, Mr. Contreras.
Thank you. First off, I agree. I would think that we could have 2 more meetings, 2 more retreats this year. And I would agree to whatever the schedule is on those. More of a concern to me is that I mentioned it early on, but not in a way that apparently we caught it. But I think we should have, since we don't have to travel for this, I think we should have it outside of the city facilities and have it at the Hilton Garden Inn. We've had retreats there in the past. There've been quite a few. It's more comfortable, more secluded, and it's just a better setting, in my opinion. I'm just going to add that in. Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking of the Hilton Garden Inn myself, because you've got food, you've got the accommodations, and, it would be investing in our community to be able to do that as well. Yeah, I was asking for 2. When we started looking at this, I don't know what the timeline was, but now thinking about 2, how do we fit 2 in between now and December? If we have 1 in August and 1 in November, it's like, is there room for really a second one before the end of the year? I don't know. I'd really like to have, as I said, I was thinking if we could have, looking at 4 a year, but we're a little late into putting that together. I don't know if there's really room to do another one in between, like November. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud. I'm looking for some help here, folks. You know, if we do this one in August, when would the next one be, and when would the next one be? That's what I'm really thinking about. How do we squeeze in two? I'm not sure we can squeeze in two anymore. Maybe we can squeeze in one between now and the end of the year after doing one in August.
I think we're all agreeing on 2 before the year's out, so maybe
Okay.
August and October before holidays get,
Oh, you're including the one in August as the two?
yeah, August.
Oh,
and then
see,
maybe
I
get 'em-
wasn't.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah,
I was thinking
think
of
we're too close.
August and two more.
No.
Ah,
no.
okay. See?
August and one more.
Okay. You're supposed to hit me. Yeah, Ms. Gooden, go ahead.
So, yes, I do agree with the 2 for the remainder of this year. I think it would also be beneficial for us to include more moving into the next calendar year. When we have this first one, I think we should be tight with what we discuss and not do, okay, so I've been in retreats before, and they do those things where you have to do this teamwork, team building thing. I think we have a lot to discuss. If we could somehow figure out a way to not include that in this round and really just stick to the important items that we need to discuss. And I think rules of procedure would also be a good topic to discuss, being that I am new and I've read it, but I would also like to hear feedback from the other council members as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's a great input, Ms. Gooden, in thinking about the content of the retreat. In my mind as well, it excludes the teamwork kind of stuff. This is strategic talk. This is where we got to sit down and put a lot of stuff on the table and have some discussion. The teamwork aspect, the games and the icebreakers and things, no, we're beyond that. We've got to be more serious in terms of what we want to discuss.
And Mayor, I think that Mr. Cundiff could facilitate that.
Yeah, and all we have to do is tell him where we're at and what we want to look at, and Mike can put it together so it's going to be substantive in every aspect, yeah. Good point as well, the rules of procedure. Any other things that you would like to, any council member would like to have an open discussion during council, please send the information to Mr. Brown, and he would forward it into Mr. Cundiff. Mr. Coons, yes, sir.
Yeah, just on the, thank you, Mayor. Just on the 21st, I think I'd like to follow Ms. Odie's recommendation if we have any space on that agenda for debt strategy, some kind of discussion on that.
Right. Very good. Anything else, Mr. Brown?
I'm sorry?
What else do we owe you?
Just the length. You want 1 day, you want a day and a half, you want 2 days for each of the sessions, August the 21st? Will 1 8-hour day suffice?
Mr. McBurnett?
Thank you, Mayor. I think Ms. Gooden made some very good points as well. The first one's only like an evening, I think, so we had it that way, but you're right, the next one's the strategic one, and typically we've done that over like a 2.5 day kind of span. And that's really about producing our vision and seeing what we want. So yes, and I agree that we need to really kind of get in the meat and potatoes of the thing and just go to the heart of what we need to do. And so that one, City Manager Brown, we need to do like 2.5 days, or what we standardly have in the past.
So looking at the calendar then, you're talking about the one on 21st of August, Mr. McBurnett, or the one after that?
The one for August 21st, what I saw was just an evening.
I thought August 21st was an all-day. Show up at 8, and we go to like 7 or 8.
That works for me.
We hadn't confirmed it yet, but that's
what I was looking at for the 21st. It's an all-day deal.
Okay, that works for me.
Okay. Am I getting I know I'm getting positives from this side, positive, okay, so on the 21st, then we'll be in all day.
Gotcha.
We can show up at 8, we can do a working breakfast, lunch, working dinner, go through all the way to like 8 or whatever, however long it takes us to complete our business. Does that work for everybody? Okay. And then for the second one, whatever date we work on that, we can do what Mr. Backford did, if we need to go 2.5 days and something like that, we can even talk about that during the one, on the August 21 meeting. Very good, okay. Does that work, Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, anything else you need from us?
No, sir.
All right, great, appreciate it. Okay, we have an interesting meeting tonight.
Can I interject?
Yes.
Location for the 21st?
Oh, yeah. Well, there was 2 for Hilton Garden Inn. Any other recommendations? Field House, or we stay at Hilton Garden Inn and they do everything, well, we're all right there. Okay, all right. Everybody good with Hilton Garden Inn? Okay. Very good, all right. Okay, that will end our work session and briefing session. And that will then go into our open city council session. So okay, that timestamp on that, city secretary is 7:11, I believe, yes, okay. All right, we are going to call to order our open session of the special city council meeting of July the 6th of 2023. And the timestamp on that, we will let it roll till 7:12. We'll open at 7:12. And I have asked Councilmember Vera Cruz if he would give us an invocation. If you would please rise with, okay, thank you. You would please rise with Mr. Vera Cruz. Thank you.
All right, let us pray. Heavenly Father, we present this meeting tonight to you and invite the Holy Spirit in to just rule over this place. As part of my daily prayer, Lord, I pray for the safety of our city, our council, our mayor, and of course our citizens. And Lord, as we search for this city manager, I pray that you send us the person that we truly need to help continue run the city. In your mighty name I pray, amen.
Amen. Please join me in pledges to our flag. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Please be seated. The next item on our agenda is citizens' input, and I believe everybody understands all the tenets and restrictions that we have. I'll dispense with reading the entire paragraph that we have on the agenda. Suffice it to say that individuals who wish to speak are limited to 2 minutes. They would please address the city council with their name and address, and any email citizen inputs that have been received are being distributed to us. I don't see any. Were there any email input, city secretary? Were there any? No. There were none. Okay, thank you. So the rules that we have on that, any emails submitted to us, we receive a hard copy, and it would go into the minutes of the record. So thank you for that. So we do have one individual that wishes to speak, Gail Sliger. And please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Gail Sliger, 1405 South Main, Duncanville, Texas. I think we would be terribly remiss, and I know it was too late to put on the agenda, but we lost a great former employee. Richard Sumberland passed away earlier this week. He faithfully served our city for 14 years with an impeccable record. And I think we would be terribly remiss not to honor him tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sliger. Most of us are aware And we noted that inadvertently, the comments or the mayor's report and council members' reports, so forth, were inadvertently omitted from our agenda tonight. We did ask the city attorney if it was possible for us to do that, and the answer was negative. We have to go by the rules. There will certainly be some understanding of that as we move forward for the next meeting, even though it may be late. Thank you. That concludes our citizens' input and comments. Moving on to item number 2, the consent agenda. City Secretary Downs, please read the consent agenda items.
Item 2A, consider a resolution adopting the amendment of the Dallas County Hazard Mitigation Action Plan 2020 edition to include a safe room rebate program action item for the city. 2B, consider a resolution approving amendment number 2 to the memorandum of understanding among participating local governments for criminal justice information sharing via the Dallas County Prosecutor. 2C, consider a resolution approving an interlocal agreement between the City of Duncanville and the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office to obtain asset seizure fund created in compliance with Article 59.08 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure for services as contained in the agreement for property awarded. 2D, consider a resolution confirming the interim city manager's appointment of Doug Sisk as a member of the Duncanville Civil Service Commission for 3-year term to expire October 31st, 2026. 2E, consider a resolution approving the procurement of equipment, goods, and services to complete the technology requirements and implementation services for the new fire station number 271 in an estimated expenditure amount of $1,079,404.65.
Mr.
Motion to
McBurnett.
approve, Mayor.
Motion to approve of Mr. McBurnett. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Vera Cruz. Council, please vote. Unanimously approved. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is executive session. City Council shall convene into closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code to discuss, deliberate commercial or financial information and/or offer a financial or other incentive to business prospect to locate, stay, or expand into Duncanville, and otherwise develop a negotiating strategy with such business. So with that, I'm going to recess our City Council. The timestamp is 7:17. And we are now recessed from Open City Council. Council members, please move to our briefing room. And for the interest of our staff